Bridge. I'm really excited to bring this review for you today because for me it was such an amazing book. I really connected to it, and I think it is a staple when it comes to reading about mental health. So if you don't know, Frankie Bridge, you may know her as Frankie Sanford. She was 1/5 of the Saturdays and S Club Juniors. If you're in the UK, you probably know her more than, you know, in America. But she married Wayne Bridge, the footballer. And she's been very open about her journey with mental health, suffering from anxiety and depression, suicidal thoughts, her OCD, and a touch with anorexia as well. So she really covers a lot in this book, and I definitely knew that I wanted to pick this book up and read it because of my own personal journey with anxiety, panic attacks, and depression. If you're new to my channel, I have suffered for many years with my mental health. I have a playlist, so if you want to know more about it, you can go and check out some of my earlier videos. But yeah, let's tell you a little bit about this book. So this book is basically a mix between Frankie's journey and then notes and information to help better understand anxiety and depression. Those are the two sort of main ones that they touch on. So I was really interested to read more about Frankie's story as well. I know she was hospitalised at one point. If you've not gone and listened to her podcast, I think it might be under the same name. Let me just double check. So her podcast is called Open Mind, so I would highly recommend going and listening to that as well. She talks to other people about mental health, but I want to know more in depth about Frankie. I obviously know her quite well. I've always not idolised, but I've sort of looked up to her as like a style icon, I guess. I used to love, well, I still do love her short hair, and I had my hair modelled on hers back in the day. But she's always someone that I've known about, and, you know, being in the pop culture. So most of it is obviously told by Frankie, but she does also have her psychiatrist and I always forget how to say the name, so bear with me. She gets her psychologist and her psychiatrist to wade in on maybe what she's experiencing, giving their sort of professional thoughts. If you don't know the difference, I definitely didn't. A psychologist is the one that more looks at, you know, natural forms of trying to help, so CBT and therapies like that, whereas a psychiatrist, although does look at that, they help more with your treatment medically, such as providing drugs and if you need to be hospitalised, that sort of thing. So that's the difference between those. And throughout there will be little tidbits, so they each have a different little icon, so you know who's talking, and they'll basically say sort of an outsider's point of view, explaining what she's feeling, maybe why she's feeling that. And I thought that would be really helpful, especially if you're very early on in your mental health stage, to be able to more understand what either you or someone you know is going through. So as far as the actual layout of this book goes, I thought it was super easy to read, had a really nice flow to it despite being broken up by the medical professionals. If I show you, most of it is really split up into nice small paragraphs like that. There is some lovely illustrations in it, and you know, there's pages just like this where she's quoted some things. There's these bits like from the professionals. It's really nicely laid out, like I said, really easy to read. And I think especially when you're right in the center of maybe a really bad period for your mental health, it can be hard to concentrate on things. I know I can't read at all when I'm having a bad day, so for it to be in sort of bite-sized chunks, it's really nice to be able to just read small snippets at a time. It makes it more manageable and less overwhelming, which I think is really nice. And even though there are some bits from professionals in here, overall this book is not patronising. You know, some books you read and some especially if they are written by someone in the medical field, it can feel a little bit patronising. You think, have they really experienced this for themselves before? But because obviously Frankie is mainly talking in this book, you could relate to her, and especially I felt that throughout this book. There were a lot of things where I saw myself in her Obviously, I wasn't into really successful pop bands, but the things she was feeling, and when she was describing things, I was like, yes, that is exactly how I felt. Like some of the symptoms she felt, and then she was talking about, you know, feeling worthless, like to her husband, and I've definitely felt that towards my husband, and feeling like you're not good enough for them, and that they could go off and find someone better off, which, in like thinking about it when you're out of that stage, is irrational, but when you're in that mindset of that time, that is wholeheartedly what you feel. So I could relate to her in that sense. Also, she was around the same sort of age when a lot of this started, which is sort of the same age that I'm at now, so again, I can relate to that. Her husband's about 10 years older, my husband's about 8 years older, so again, there were similarities there in our journey. I'm really thankful that I had amazing support and continued support from my husband. He has experienced mental health himself, so he knows the right things to say to me, whereas I think Frankie, when she was with her husband and he was just like first like being opened up to her mental health, didn't really know what to say, and for a lot of people that can be for both sides of it, it can be quite frustrating, especially if they don't react the way that you'd want them to, because they just don't know how to react to how you're feeling the situation. They don't know the right things to say. So it was really interesting to read that, because I've not necessarily had that that barrier, because Darren's always sort of known how I'm feeling, especially when it comes to like my depression. So she does go through a lot of her time, you know, being in a pop band and the ramifications that had on her mental health. She also talked a little bit about the time when she doesn't name him, but the time that she went out with Dougie from McFly, and that side of life, like for her, I completely forgotten about, but I remember back in the day it was a big thing that they were together, and when he went into rehab, she did blame herself partly for that. So it goes and explains that a little bit as well. She talks about how she struggled through pregnancy, and all the pressures that comes with, and worrying about whether there's going to be that initial influx of love when you have your child. And she also talks about post-birth, and how she always thought that she would get postnatal depression because she's already suffered with depression throughout her life. And again, something I can relate to. I definitely think when I have kids one day, there is quite a large possibility that I may get postnatal depression, just I guess because of the way my mind's wired. Like, I don't know, it has nothing to do with the actual baby put in front of you. I think it's just something obviously chemically that I could suffer with. So one of the chapters in this book is about medication. She does talk very openly about the medication she takes. She has the type of anxiety and depression that after a while starts to resist the effectiveness of the drugs, so she is constantly sort of trying to switch between drugs to help them be more effective for her. So she is sort of on a constant journey medical wise, but she does recognise that you need both, you know, talking therapies and medication for that even balance. And one of, I can't remember which of her professionals it was that she works with, he said, you know, medication is very much like a life jacket. It's not going to cure everything. I mean, it can do for some people, but it's not going to let you sink. It's going to help you just like bob along the surface. And that was something that really resonated with me. I thought that was a great sort of metaphor, and I can definitely see how medication just keeps you, you know, bobbing on along nicely on the surface, and just helps you keep afloat, which I definitely feel it does for me. They also talk about just a little bit about how you can be on medication for depression through your pregnancy. Obviously consult your doctor, you know, don't just go by what's in the book and what I'm saying. But a lot of medications you can still take during pregnancy, which is something I've spoken very briefly about with my doctor. I think there is a lot more anxiety drugs that you can't take, but again, talk to your doctor. So it touches on that. So I think it just opens your mind up to a lot of things. Like, no matter where you are in your journey with anxiety, I think this book is really helpful, and I would totally recommend it to anyone, whether they're right at the start of their journey, you know, just discovered that what they're feeling is anxiety or panic attacks, or they think they might be suffering with depression. whether you've just been diagnosed or like me, you know, I'm maybe 6 years on, that's just a number I've pulled out of my head, with my anxiety. I'm like a year on now with my depression, and I still felt this book was useful to me. Maybe not some of the stuff the professionals talk about, because I sort of already know that, like all about CBT and fight or flight, all that sort of stuff I've heard a million times. But more so being able to relate to someone and connect to Frankie's story, that is really inspiring and just nice, again, to have that reassurance you're not alone with this. I guess because I've sort of grown up seeing her in The Eye, I used to like the Saturdays and S Club Juniors and that, it was really nice to hear her side of her story rather than what's just portrayed in the media. And one thing it also made me stop and think about is I think a lot of people sort of have this misconception that depression or anxieties, it just stops. For some people, it definitely could have like that specific end date, whether that be because you're on a good lot of medication, or you've reached the end of a therapy, or you're in a different job, you've moved places, whatever it may be. I think a lot of people don't understand that for most people, there will never be that end date where you stop suffering. It may be a reduced amount, but there's always going to things that crop up, and I think for the rest of my life I'm going to suffer with anxiety and depression. It may not be exactly in the form that it presents itself now. It definitely isn't the same when I started with my anxiety and panic attacks, you know, 6 odd years ago. Probably more than that, to be fair. Like when I first got panic attacks, it was largely to do with travel and being on planes. That is no longer an issue as much. For me now, it's sort of based around work and, you know, going back into work. So it manifests itself as you grow, as you age, and I think that is something important to remember, especially if you know a loved one going through with it. They very possibly will suffer with this for the rest of their life, and that's, I wouldn't say it's not a bad thing, but it's not something that you should be like, it's not like a prison sentence, you know. They can learn to live with it, and they probably will learn to live with it and deal with it, hopefully in a very successful way. That being said, getting slightly off topic from the book, I did give this book 5 out of 5 stars, if you couldn't tell. I loved it. I definitely would recommend it to anyone. And I thought it was just beautifully written, really, you know, had the reader in mind. It wasn't patronising, but it was informational, and yeah, couldn't say enough good things about this. So if you do suffer, I would recommend picking this book up, or if you know someone that suffers. If you've got any comments that you'd like to share around mental health, leave them down below, and also go and check out my playlist if you want to know a bit more about my mental health in particular. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos, and I will see you very soon. Bye guys. We're gonna do a Baloo cameo. Here's Baloo. He's like, I need a haircut, mummy. Having a haircut soon. It was snowing out on our walk, wasn't it? You had little snow drifts in your fur.